The camera zooms in on a bright news studio. The lights are shining, and the buzz of the production team fills the background. A well-dressed news reporter sits at the desk, ready for the next segment. His voice is smooth, practiced, the kind you hear every evening. "Good evening," the reporter begins, a small smile playing on his lips. "In today's segment, we'll be discussing the incredible stories of our veterans and the sacrifices they've made for our country." He pauses, glancing at his notes. He adjusts his tie and continues, "But one story is getting more attention than others. It's about a veteran who served in one of the toughest battles of his time. And, well, let's just say, not everyone agrees with his views on how things should have been handled." He looks up from the paper and addresses the camera directly. "Let's take a closer look at this veteran, shall we?" The screen shifts to a photo of the veteran in his younger years, wearing a military uniform. The image is clear, showing him with a serious expression, standing proud alongside his fellow soldiers. The voice of the reporter continues. "Meet Sergeant Michael Harris. He served in the military for over 20 years, fighting in some of the most intense conflicts of the last few decades. From multiple tours overseas to the front lines, Harris has seen it all." A montage of quick images flashes, shots of military camps, soldiers in action, and medals being pinned on Sergeant Harris. The reporter's voice continues to narrate. "He earned countless commendations for his bravery and leadership, including the Bronze Star and the Purple Heart. He's the kind of person who doesn't speak much about his experiences, but when he does, people listen. And that's exactly what has made him such a respected figure in the veteran community." The camera cuts back to the reporter, who now speaks with a tone of seriousness. "Though his time in the military was marked by courage and sacrifice, Sergeant Harris, like many veterans, has a strong opinion on how things should be handled in the world today. His views, however, have recently come under fire, especially after a public statement he made that some found controversial." The camera cuts back to the news anchor's desk. The reporter shifts his papers, clearing his throat as he prepares to dive into the next part of the story. Now, as you can imagine, not everyone shares the same view. Some people think Harris's opinions are outdated and even offensive. And one person in particular didn't hold back when expressing his thoughts about the veteran. The screen switches to a shot of the reporter, visibly smirking. He leans forward, as if sharing a secret with the audience. His tone shifts, becoming more sarcastic. "Now, Harris recently made a comment that's been making the rounds online. He said that the government should do more to support veterans returning home." Pretty standard stuff, right? Well, the response from some people has been, let's just say, less than favorable. The reporter pauses for effect, his smile growing wider. In fact, one reporter who clearly disagrees with Harris's views made a rather humorous comment about it. And that's where things got interesting. The camera zooms in slightly on the reporter as he delivers the next line with a playful chuckle. The reporter, in a sarcastic tone, jokingly asked, "What's next, a petition to bring back the draft? Or maybe veterans should just run for office?" He laughed, and so did the studio. It was clear no one took Harris's views seriously. The reporter shakes his head, clearly amused, and adds, "But that's the thing about veterans. They've seen things we can't even begin to imagine. And for some of them, those jokes hit a little too close to home." The camera cuts to a shot of Sergeant Michael Harris. He's sitting in a quiet, dimly lit room, facing the camera directly. There's no smile on his face, just a steady, calm gaze. The room is still, and the intensity of his presence is palpable. The reporter's voice fades in, but here's where things take a turn. Instead of getting angry or storming off, Harris calmly responds. And when he speaks, it's clear this is a man who's not afraid to stand his ground. The screen shows Harris as he speaks into a microphone. His voice is steady, measured, but there's a firmness in every word. "I don't expect everyone to agree with me," Harris says, his voice low but clear. "But I'll tell you one thing. You might mock my opinion, but you can't mock my service. I've been there, I've done that, and if you think this is a game, you're wrong." The reporter's voice continues. The tone in his voice doesn't waver. There's no anger, no shouting, just a man who's seen the worst and isn't afraid to speak his truth. The camera cuts back to the studio where the reporter looks a little more serious now. He clears his throat, as if trying to regain his composure. Harris didn't stop there. He continued, making it clear that while he may not have the same opinions as everyone else, his experience cannot be undermined. He said, "I've bled for this country, and I don't take those sacrifices lightly. So before you make jokes, maybe you should walk a mile in my boots." The reporter pauses, reflecting on the weight of the words. The camera shifts slightly to show the other reporters in the studio, all of them visibly uncomfortable now, their smiles replaced with quiet expressions. No one expects what's coming next. The atmosphere in the studio shifts. The camera stays focused on the reporter, but there's a noticeable tension hanging in the air. It's like the room has suddenly gotten quieter, more serious. The laughter and lightheartedness from moments ago have completely vanished. The reporter shifts in his seat, trying to regain some control over the situation. He clears his throat, but his words are a little slower now. Harris didn't just let it go. He didn't ignore the comment, like most would have done. Instead, he leaned in and said something that left everyone speechless. The screen flashes back to Harris, still sitting, but now his eyes are even sharper, his posture a bit more rigid. There's no hesitation in his voice. "Look," Harris begins, his tone slow but forceful. "I've been to war, and I've seen things that'll haunt me for the rest of my life. So when I speak about the way veterans are treated, I'm not speaking out of anger. I'm speaking out of a lifetime of experience. So when you mock that, don't expect me to just smile and nod." The reporter pauses for a moment, the weight of Harris's words settling in the air. There's something about the way Harris said it. It wasn't just words, it was a statement. He wasn't looking for approval, and he wasn't trying to make friends. He was telling everyone exactly how he felt, and it was impossible to ignore. The camera cuts to a close-up of the reporter, whose smug expression has now disappeared. He seems unsure of how to respond, shifting in his chair, clearly caught off guard. Harris continues, his voice steady and unyielding. "You want to mock me for caring about my brothers and sisters who served? You want to make a joke about something that I've dedicated my life to? Fine. But remember this, I fought for your right to be an idiot. And I'll never regret that." The studio falls completely silent. Even the crew behind the cameras seems frozen. The other reporters exchange glances, their faces tight with discomfort. No one knows how to follow up on that. The reporter opens his mouth, but no words come out. He's trying to find something to say, but he's lost. His scripted jokes feel hollow now. The camera lingers for a moment on his face, showing the shift from confidence to realization. This isn't something he can laugh off. The screen cuts back to Harris. He doesn't say another word. He simply stands up, adjusts his jacket, and walks out of the frame. The impact of his words still lingers in the studio. For a moment, everything is still. No one knows what to do next. The camera lingers on the empty space where Harris just stood. The air in the studio feels thick, as if everyone is holding their breath. No one speaks for several moments. The silence is almost unbearable. The reporter, still sitting at his desk, finally clears his throat. But it's not the confident, playful tone from earlier. It's uncertain, almost apologetic. "So, that was unexpected," he mutters, trying to regain some semblance of control. But it's clear the moment has left him shaken. His eyes dart around the room, seeking some kind of comfort, but there's no laughter, no easy recovery. The camera cuts to the other reporters in the studio, each one awkwardly shifting in their seats. Some of them exchange uncomfortable glances. Others stare down at their notes, as if pretending they didn't just witness something that shook the very foundation of the conversation. The mood has changed completely. No one wants to be the first to break the silence. The reporter, who made the mocking comment, looks down, his face flushed. It's as if he's suddenly realizing the gravity of the situation. He runs his fingers through his hair, and for a moment, you can see the realization hit him. What he thought was a harmless joke has backfired, hard. Finally, another reporter, a woman sitting off to the side, speaks up. "Well, that escalated quickly," she says quietly, breaking the tension. But even her voice sounds careful, measured. No one laughs. The camera cuts to the crew behind the scenes. A few technicians look at each other, whispering, unsure of what to do next. One of them adjusts a dial on the camera, but it feels like a mechanical act, more than anything. No one is focused on the broadcast anymore. The entire studio feels uncomfortable, like they're all waiting for someone to make the first move. The reporter in front of the camera, who had been the most vocal, shifts again, his hands now trembling slightly. He takes a deep breath and begins to speak, but it's clear he's struggling to find the right words. "Well," he begins, forcing a smile that doesn't quite reach his eyes. "We've all seen that veterans can be passionate about their views." He tries to recover, but it's not the same. The words sound hollow, like he's trying to cover up the impact Harris's words had on everyone in the room. The mood is heavy, and everyone seems to feel it. The crew, the reporters, even the audience who would normally be watching the segment are now left in stunned silence. It's not just about the words anymore, it's about the power behind them. The camera shifts slowly, almost reluctantly, from the tense faces of the reporters to the quiet hallway just outside the studio. There, Sergeant Michael Harris stands, his figure tall and steady. He begins to walk towards the exit, each step deliberate, measured, and unhurried. There's a sense of calm in his movements, as if he has all the time in the world. His steps are sure, confident. There's no trace of uncertainty, no need to rush. He walks as if he's already made peace with everything around him, with everything he's endured and everything he's said. There's no backward glance, no lingering doubts. His mind is already elsewhere, and his body moves in perfect alignment with that certainty. He isn't leaving because of the tension, but rather because he has nothing left to prove. As Harris approaches the door, he pauses for just a brief moment. He turns slightly, his gaze sweeping over the room one last time. It's not a dramatic look, it's not defiant or challenging. Instead, his eyes are calm, almost neutral, an unreadable expression, as if to say everything he needed to say has already been said. The words he spoke in that moment still seem to echo in the silence around him, but Harris doesn't feel the need to stay and watch the reactions unfold. It's clear that whatever happened inside that studio, he has already moved past it. The weight of his words still hangs in the air, but he simply looks forward, as though ready to leave it behind. Without saying another word, Harris turns and exits the studio. The door shuts quietly behind him, almost too softly, as if the space itself doesn't want to disturb the stillness left in his wake. The sound of his boots on the floor fades gradually, until all that's left is the silence that follows him out the door. His departure is without fanfare, without a final gesture. Just a man who had nothing more to say. A man who didn't need to say anything else. Inside the studio, the tension is still thick in the air, palpable and unresolved. But Harris is no longer there to carry it. The room feels empty in a way that words can't express. The other reporters sit frozen, their expressions still caught between discomfort and disbelief. They're left with nothing but the faint echo of Harris's words hanging like a weight in the air. No one knows what to do, how to respond, or whether anything can be said that would make things right. But the truth is, Harris has already made his point. He's walked away, and there's no turning back now. The camera lingers for a long moment on the empty space where he stood just moments ago. The stillness is almost suffocating. In that brief silence, the only sound that can be heard is the hum of the studio's equipment. Machines buzzing, lights flickering, the soft whir of cameras. But in that quiet, the studio itself feels distant, as if it's no longer important. The hum of the equipment, once a background noise to the chaos of live broadcasting, now feels like the only sound left in a room that has been irrevocably altered. In that silence, the space between the words said and unsaid, the silence speaks louder than anything Harris could have said in the studio.